offseason. Listen to this. Obviously, talent is here, but we've just got to finish and go be aggressive the same way they did. I don't want to sit back and just watch other people build, and we stay the same. So we definitely need some call to action. Now, the Cowboys haven't made big offseason splashes recently. Look at this. This surprised me. Their biggest free agent signing over the last 5 seasons, guys, was Gerald McCoy's 3-year, $18 million deal in 2020. Otherwise, their largest deals were for 1 year, worth less than $5 million. The biggest trade they've made in that span was for wide receiver Brandon Cooks, who has averaged 36 receiving yards per game in his 2 seasons with the team. So, with all of that, Mina, what should be the Cowboys' biggest priority in the offseason?
Yeah, in the past, the Cowboys' approach has just been to pay their own, but pay them too late. I would not make that mistake with Micah Parsons. First, you got to restructure Dak Prescott's contract. That obviously $90 million cap hit isn't going to stick around. And then with that flexibility you gain, you sign Micah Parsons to the biggest deal that any edge rusher has ever signed. Now, I do think that, to his point, they need to be active in finding a receiver. Obviously, they need to get better running the football and stopping the run. I imagine that'll be a priority in the draft. But priority number 1 is number 11, who is one of the 3 best defensive players in the NFL, in my estimation.
Yeah, and a lot of people, Mina, would tell you that the Eagles are one of the teams that really knows how to press the advantage on going to their star players early for contract extensions. And obviously the Cowboys have not done that. So Micah Parsons, getting him under contract long-term is a priority. In terms of their own free agents to re-sign, nothing gigantic. Jordan Lewis, the cornerback, Oso Digizua, a couple of guys that they might look to re-sign. But, of course, they're on defense, and they have a new defensive coordinator, so we'll see how that all shakes out. But the Cowboys, in terms of free agency, I think the sense I get is that they've heard what people have said, that they probably believe there's a happy medium somewhere between going nuts in free agency, which they don't believe is the right way to build a roster, and doing pretty much nothing, which is what they did last year. So I do think you'll see them go out, maybe add to the offensive and defensive lines, and definitely add another wide receiver.
Some advice, too. You can't say in the offseason we're all in. Because you said that last year. You send a message to the entire fan base.
Say whatever you want.
And then you're not all in. So that's one thing. Don't set up the fan base by, hey, we're all in. You get everybody excited, and then you don't do anything of relevance.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, we talked about being nuts. Being nuts or going nuts would be not paying Micah Parsons first, not getting that deal done. I agree with Mina wholeheartedly. He's not only the leader on the field, but off the field, he's a guy that's championed the Dallas Cowboys every opportunity he gets a chance to speak. And then I think you go out and you try to talk to John Lynch about acquiring Deboo Samuel, talking to him, will you be in shape? What do you want to do? How do you want to fit into this offense? And now that's a guy that can play running back, a guy that can play receiver, somebody that can be a number 2 and a chess piece off of CD Lamb. And then when you get into the draft, this gives you flexibility of whether you want to pick someone that helps you run the football or someone that helps you stop the run. For years, Mina and I, Marcus, Dan, we've talked about the fact that they can't stop the run. Not built well at linebacker, not built well in the middle of that defense from a defensive tackle perspective, even though you addressed it a couple of years ago in the draft. So if you go get Deboo Samuel, now you build your offense around Dak, and CD Lamb, and maybe you can find a way to stop the run in the middle of the field defensively early in the draft.
Another conversation, too, in this division. It's always been the Cowboys and somebody else, right? Especially the last decade. Now it's the Eagles and Commanders and the Cowboys. So keep that in mind on how that develops here in the offseason leading into what they plan on doing in 2025. All right, we're just getting started. Here's NFL Live. Our first analyst. My career, guys. This was it. Bengals went 8-4 when Higgins played last season compared to 1-4 when he didn't. They averaged more points per game, and Joe Burrow averaged 23 more yards per game. And interestingly enough, Jamar Chase loved it when T was there. Look at the numbers. Because, of course, the focus of the defense, not just on number 1, it was help there on the other side. So, Graz, we heard Joe Burrow. And let me tell you, if a mic was hot, Joe Burrow was talking all last week on Radio Row, explaining the situation. And he made it sound so easy and simple about, hey, how do we keep the family together here? Is it that simple?
Well, no, obviously, no, it's not that simple. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, what is Joe Burrow actually talking about in terms of his willingness to work with his own contract? Is he willing to give back money the way Aaron Rodgers did when he got to the Jets? Or is he just talking about kicking the can down the road in terms of cash and cap? So that has yet to be answered. But regardless of that, the biggest obstacle the Cincinnati Bengals face in signing any free agent ever is their preferred contract structure. They insist on a contract structure that they do not guarantee any money beyond the first year. They made an exception for Joe Burrow. If Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson insist on second-year guarantees, then the Bengals are either going to have to change the way they've always done business, or they're going to have to say goodbye to those guys. So it's tricky right now. We don't know exactly what will happen with Jamar Chase and his extension. T. Higgins can be franchised again. It would cost about $26 million. Not ridiculous, but also maybe not something they want to do in light of all their other needs. So no, Kevin, not that simple. Bengals are in for a tricky offseason.
Well, first I'll say I love Joe Burrow putting pressure on the franchise to rethink the way they structure contracts, as Dan talked about. He brought up the example of the Philadelphia Eagles, who seem to be able to afford everyone in large part because they put a lot of cash up front, big signing bonuses, particularly with some of these guys that they've signed on offense. That's great. And I do think if the Bengals did that, they could retain more of their free agents. The problem for them, though, is unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, they have drafted extremely poorly on defense. This is part of the reason why the Eagles are able to spend so much on offense, is that they hit on so many picks on defense. The Bengals, unfortunately, have not. And then the other issue with Higgins in particular, RC can speak to this as well, he is so far and away the gem of free agency, the receiver that many teams will want, that even if they restructure Burrow's contract and give big signing bonuses and could afford him, they might still get priced out because he's in so much demand and other teams are willing to break the bank. So it's not impossible, but I do think it would be difficult.
Mina, that's exactly what I talked about yesterday, is that you can have these heavy contracts offensively when you're Philadelphia because of the young talent on the defensive side of the ball that you've had yet to pay. They don't have that in Cincinnati. Also, with Al Golden now becoming the defensive coordinator, you're going to try to find ways to make this defense better. And maybe this is an opportunity where you go to Joe Burrow and you say, look, you had an historic season. We watched Jamar and T. Higgins dominate, but we still didn't make it to the playoffs because we couldn't get stops. And so now you're going to have to earn that contract. You're going to have to show us that you're worth it without having a 1A and a 1B wide receiver. And to the other point that Mina made is this. Yes, you can sign A.J. Brown and you can sign Devontae Smith because you're talking about a guy who's the third highest paid wide receiver in A.J. Brown and someone who is farther down the list in Devontae Smith. With Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you could possibly be talking about the number one paid wide receiver by a large amount in Chase and the number 2 or 3 guy in T. Higgins.
Yeah, and no matter how many points you put up, you still got to stop somebody. Keep in mind the Bengals had 4 losses this season when they scored 30 points or more. Tied for the most in NFL history. Keep in mind, if they would have made the playoffs, that MVP could have been Joe Burrow's because that defense let him down each and every single course. But no one was sending chocolate-covered mushrooms to anyone. With a new head coach and new GM, the team is going in a new direction as they officially parted ways with the 41-year-old future Hall of Famer. So after tearing his Achilles 4 snaps into his first season in New York, Rodgers really struggled in his first full year with the Jets, but his poor play goes back to his final season here with the Packers, where he put up the worst total QBR of his career and tied his career high for turnovers. You know, last season, Rodgers ranked bottom 10 in both total QBR and yards per attempt. Back here with Mina, RC, and Graz. Mina, looking forward here for the Jets. What's next for them and their plans if they have to rebuild this roster going forward?
Yeah, there are needs on both sides of the ball. I think Ryan's going to talk about the defense, so I'll focus on the offense for a second. Aaron Glenn and their new offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, come from the Lions, where they built an environment for the quarterback, Jared Goff, to flourish, starting with, of course, that offensive line in the run game. I think the Jets need to do the same. Right tackle jumps out. The other thing, and it sounds really specific, but it's really important, they need a tight end who can block. And to that end, I'm telling you, Tyler Warren from Penn State, 7 might be a little bit rich But this kid can do everything. He is about as complete a tight end as we have seen in recent years, and I know that's high praise considering Brock Bowers was just drafted, but I would love his fit in terms of sort of reestablishing the identity for this offense. So just focusing on protection, blocking, run game, I think, and then you worry about the quarterback, maybe not even this season.
Man, I know this is not supposed to be my job right now, but Tyler Warren is an absolute stud. I get it. We watched Brock Bowers in year one and what he was able to do. I would actually think or feel that Tyler Warren is more versatile than Brock Bowers was. And maybe it's because of the way Penn State used him, but I got to see it in person against Notre Dame, and he was absolutely sensational. I mean, fantastic in so many ways. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we watched this team take a step back. Obviously, Jermaine Johnson was out for the season. The Hassan Reddick trade was an absolute bust, but we watched Will McDonald take a step up as a rusher. We saw Jamie Sherwood fill in for C.J. Mosley and become a player, but let's think about what they are at the safety position. I feel like for 2 or 3 years, they've been trying to get better at that position. Played a lot last year with Jalen Mills. Sauce Gardner wasn't as good as we'd seen him in the first 2 years. Can Aaron Glenn get him to play at a higher level? And what are you going to do with DJ Reed on the other side? Also, you need to find a way to be able to create a 4-man rush. Does Jermaine Johnson coming back do that? Or how do you add that through the draft or maybe free agency? I feel like there are so many holes on this defense, but for me, I go with what Mina said. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, being able to produce through physicality and get into the play action game, and maybe Aaron Glenn can be that next step up defensively to get them back to playing high-level ball.
Yeah.
And the move they made this week with Aaron Rodgers is the first step in figuring out quarterback. To Mina's point, that doesn't mean they have to go draft one this year if they don't like any of them. They have to figure out what the plan is. Does that mean Tyrod Taylor is a bridge quarterback for this year until they figure out who the long-term answer is? It's going to have to be a long-term solution at quarterback, a young player on a rookie contract most likely, because you look at the Jets, they have drafted well. They have extensions coming for guys like Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson and possibly, Breece Hall and all these guys. So their roster, as you budget it out over the next couple of years, gets a little more complicated, a little more expensive. They're going to have to find what everyone's looking for, that bargain quarterback for the next few years.
Yeah, to your point, they have drafted well outside the quarterback position. That's the one thing that has hurt them, especially over the last decade.
We here. Hey, no stone unturned, man. We coming in here, we come to dominate. That's it. We got a lot on the line. And it all starts with your why, man. It all starts with your why. Hey, one at a time, baby. It's on us. It's on us. Come on, Jahan.
Hurts. Looks. He's going deep. Caught. Jahan. Dodson.
We already know what time it is.
It'll be tush-push territory. And he's in. Touchdown.
Hey, into the field. Oh, my God. 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 I blew it. He's on it. Diving interception. It's Nathan Bond. Just one play at a time. No one's greater for the moment than you right now. Yes, sir. Just one play at a time and trust everything. We'll finish it.
Hurts. Back. Looking. He is going deep.
One more time. Keep breath in. Keep breath out. Let's go get it. Let's go hunt. Let's go hunt.
Mahomes is back. He's hit. He's hit. He fumbles the football. The Eagles have won Super Bowl 59.
Congratulations, man. You know what? Yeah, I'm proud of you, dog. That's the way to do it, man. Go enjoy it.
What a message from Nick Sirianni to Saquon Barkley. The soundtracks will get some run in the Nagandi household this offseason. Love hurts. The sign in Philly is part of the post-Super Bowl celebration, the city of brotherly love. It's Jalen Hurts' world as the Super Bowl MVP. Now, the Eagles heading into the season without O.C. Kellen Moore, who is now the Saints head coach. The Lions lost both of their coordinators as Ben Johnson is now the Bears head coach, and Aaron Glenn leads the Jets here. And this is a big deal Listen, you could have fantastic rosters. If you lose coordinators, it has an impact. So with this major change here, or changes with the Lions, what kind of impact will it have for Detroit here, RC?
I mean, it's hard, right? And that's why you have to win it, Kevin, when you have the opportunity. When you're up on the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship in the second half, you have to finish. When you have the Washington Commanders on your home field and you're the number 1 overall seed in the NFC, you have to find a way to win, because now you've lost both coordinators who must be great leaders of men as well. And so what effect does that have? Also, how do your players that were injured last year, that totally decimated this defense, how healthy are they? How much can they play to their potential? Can Kelvin Shepard find a way to get the rush back with a 4-man rush, with Aleem McNeil healthy, with Aiden Hutchinson healthy? What about that back end? Carlton Davis, is he coming back? Amik Robertson, will he be ready for the slot? Can you find a way to be better at the backer opposite Alex Anzalone? There are so many questions for this team that won 15 games just a year ago. And so to me, it's going to be very important that they hone in this offseason, in OTAs, in mini camps, not only to get those coordinators adjusted, but to get some of those players back healthy and in the rotation ready for September and October throughout next season.
And RC, I do think to the extent that they need to add, if there's an available edge rusher this offseason, you're going to probably see the Lions poking around on it. That's something they felt they needed, even when Aiden Hutchinson was healthy and playing at a high level. So watch out for them on that edge rusher market. In terms of the coordinators, guys, this is where, this is why they pay Dan Campbell. Like, he built this coaching staff that was so good that everybody wanted to rate it this offseason. So the way he establishes the culture there in Detroit, the way that he develops and empowers his assistant coaches, we'll see what happens as guys move up into larger roles and hopefully, become the kind of coaches that we saw Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn become during their time there in Detroit. But this starts from the top down on the coaching staff, and it's on Dan Campbell to make sure these guys are ready to go.
The loss of Ben Johnson concerns me. It's easy to look at this Lions offense, which, by the way, they're not losing many players. Kevin Zeitler is a free agent, Dan Skipper, Tim Patrick, but for the most part, they're running it back. So you can look at them and say, cool, just hit copy paste. You will be fine. That's what the Philadelphia Eagles did in 2023, and we all remember how that went. Look, defenses in the NFL are constantly evolving. You have to evolve in response to that. And I think for Detroit, it would be a mistake to think this offense can look exactly like it did with Ben Johnson. Their new offensive coordinator, John Morton, he doesn't want, you don't want him to obviously deviate too much from the proven formula, and the talent is the talent. But he also has to show that sort of adjustment both in games and over the course of the season for this offense to continue what it's been.
Cannot copy and paste. Again, to your point, a year ago, we were talking about a completely different story with the Philadelphia Eagles as they struggled with the OC and the DC being pushed out there. All right, guys, thank you. New on NFL Live. 2 people were shot in Philadelphia as the Eagles celebrated during their Super Bowl parade. Now, police tell CBS Philadelphia that the shooting happened at 23rd and Spring Garden Streets, which was near the end of the parade route that finished at the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum. The shooting did not appear to disrupt the parade or rally that followed. No motive was given for the shooting, and police did not disclose the status of the 2 people who were shot. Coming up here, as we continue NFL Live, the Steelers offense struggle with consistency at quarterback, and both starters will now be free agents. So who will be under center for the black and gold? NFL Live to New Orleans here. By the way, Kellen Moore was at the parade celebrating with the Eagles, but now he's the new head coach, and he had this to say about his new team.
I think this is a talented roster. We played here week 3. We took it down to a minute left to finally score a touchdown when I was in Philadelphia. It was a really challenging game. And so throughout this season, we've seen it. Obviously, injuries were a challenge this year, and those things sometimes are challenging in uncontrollable circumstances. And so we recognize there's so much good going on here. We want to embrace the good, don't lose any of the good while building this thing the right way.
Back here with Mina, RC, and Graz. Mina, Kellen Moore sounds confident, and he should be because you're a head coach. You're taking over a football team. But is this roster good enough here for what he's saying?
I'd be laughing because it'd be funny if he was like, look, I'll be honest with y'all, we are in cap hell. The defense is old. Our offensive line is a problem.
100%.
I'm stuck with Derek Carr. Like, he's not going to be honest about the actual state of the New Orleans Saints. I do think his point about the injuries on offense are notable, particularly Chris Olave. And I do think this offense can improve.
Yeah.
The defense is where you just got to get younger, faster, better. Unfortunately, you don't have the ability to do so in free agency, so they're going to have to draft well. And this is, by the way, the same GM who has not drafted well the last 2 years, but retained his job. Kellen Moore is going to have to lean very heavily on him because that's not his side of the ball, and it's the side of the ball with the biggest problems, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the difficult part, right? You think about like Alontae Taylor, maybe Paulson, Deboo, who was injured last year. Those are two young, good players. But outside of them, there's no hope coming down the pike for this team. And so that's what scares me if I'm Kellen Moore. And Mina is right. Like, if we would have gave him some truth serum, that would have been a totally different press conference for him. He would have been like, hey, man, we in trouble. They're going to have to be patient with me. We're going to have to retool this roster. But that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to take Kellen getting some older players to play closer to their potential and offensively finding a way to mask some of the deficiencies on the offensive line and also in their quarterback, Derek Carr.
Hey, let's Roz. Moore was non-committal when talking about Derek Carr. What more can you tell us about Carr's future in New Orleans, especially that potential cap hit?
Well, we're going to know in about a month, Kevin, because on the third day of the league year, which is March 14th or 15th, depending how that's calculated, the remaining $30 million of Derek Carr's $40 million for 2025 becomes guaranteed. As of now, he's guaranteed $10 million no matter what. The cap hit is a little over $51 million. If they cut him, they still have a dead money charge of about $50 million. So, do you move on and take that hit? Do you talk about restructuring him and knocking this year's cap number down? But that likely means committing to him beyond this year. So you have to make the decision of whether you want to do that. So Derek Carr, the way his contract is built, forces the Saints to make a decision by that third day of the league year, and it's something that is high on their priority list right now.
They started so well to start September, and you got some hope there from the offense. The Saints lost all 7 games that Carr did not play last season, averaging just 13 points per game. Still to come as we continue here on NFL Live, a heartbreaking loss he bleeds for this city because he took a beer can to the face, and you see the beer can on the top of his forehead with some blood. So, oh my goodness, you can't make it up in Philadelphia. So after the dust settles and everybody sobers up, this Eagles team, they've got a ton of decisions to make, especially Howie Roseman. And Graz, when you look at this team, how much room do they have to work with, especially now dealing with a lot of big question marks?
Yeah, when that cut on Howie Roseman's forehead heals, he's going to have to figure out who on the defensive side of the ball the Eagles can and can't keep. Cap space-wise, they're kind of middle of the pack. We don't even know what the cap is yet, but relative to other teams, kind of middle of the pack is where they should land. But 3 key free agents on the defensive side of the ball, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, and Zach Bond, all 3 of whom were instrumental in that Super Bowl victory and all year long. Add in Mekhi Becton on the offensive line, and they have some decisions to make about who to keep. It's not really the cap space as much as the way their cash payments for other big contracts start to get more expensive in the next couple of years. Guys like Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith have their contracts built till they'll be making more salary, more cash over the next couple of years. And then you have the extensions possibly looming for guys like, Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter over the next couple of years. So the Eagles have to budget out over the next 3 or 4 years their whole salary cap and cash plan and figure out who can stay and who can't.
Man, whatever that budget is, Zach Bond better be at the top of it. Listen, this is a dude that not a lot was expected of coming into this season. And Kevin, you know this, being an Eagles fan, he was an absolute stud and a star from week 1 in Brazil versus Green Bay. He's shown position versatility. He's shown that he can be the off linebacker. He can be the green dot. And he's an absolute turnover machine, being an all-pro this year in 2024. To me, Zach Bond is a centerpiece of what this defense is. And obviously you want to keep Sweat. Obviously you want to keep Milton Williams. But there's some things in the draft that may help you with that. You don't just pick up guys like Zach Bond off the street unless you're picking up Zach Bond off the street.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ryan. And while I don't like to make draft predictions, I will make one now. Whenever the Eagles pick first, whether it's at the end of the first or they trade up or trade down, they're going to take a defensive lineman, and we're all going to go, how did the Philadelphia Eagles get that guy? How did Howie Roseman do it again? Because I do think that's what's going to happen. RC, you alluded to this. This draft class, in terms of defensive linemen, is stacked. I mean, I'm just starting to study them now. There are so many defensive tackles that should go in the first round. There's great edges, too. And the Eagles have such a proven track record when it comes to finding both offensive and defensive linemen. Whereas a Zach Bond, I find it very hard to believe you're going to get that kind of skill set and intelligence, frankly, from a rookie linebacker. So that is the position I would focus on keeping, and I would draft the defensive line.
And keep in mind, if you look at the track record for the Eagles, they obviously target defensive linemen and offensive linemen in the draft. They do not target linebackers. They do not put a premium, so they hit one out of the park with Zach Bond right there. Now, the Eagles' dominating run has put a handful of teams on notice, especially within the NFC East, as Pennsylvania native and Cowboys star Micah Parsons said this about his team. And